I'm going to talk a little bit about BRJA, and I'm going to pass it over to Julia to talk more about today's event on Zoom. If you're not familiar, Baltimore Racial Justice Action, we kind of do three different pockets of work. One is the 13th of the month event that you'll be experiencing today. The other two ways we do our work are our public workshop and through our private contracting work. I'd encourage you to go to Be More Anti-Racist to learn more about that. There's a questionnaire that you can fill out if you're interested in the private workshops. And then we usually offer our public workshops in person. We're working on converting those over so they can be virtual. You can contact us for more information on that. Those workshops are usually done for white people and for people of color. The other thing that you'll notice in your chat that is going to appear is our link for our donation page. Our 13th of the month events are usually done in person, and we usually have a little jar sitting there for you to send some donations to. So we're putting this link in the chat. Please contribute and put a donation in here. The events that we have are free, but of course, donations allow us to continue to make these events to be free. So now I'm going to pass it over to Julia.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our event. My name is Julia Scott, and I am a trainer with Baltimore Racial Justice Action, or BRJA. And I'm also a co-coordinator with Michelle, who's also on the line today. And I do the one half of the 13th of the month coordination. So, as Anthony had mentioned, every 13th of the month we have these events. Usually we are focusing on a topic regarding anti-racism and oppression. So for example, like I think in April, our last event that we did virtually, it was on social justice, self-care in the time of COVID-19. So we kind of have these topics that are surrounding anti-racism and oppression work. And it's a way to educate people who are interested in learning about the work that we do, but also kind of like maybe getting some more information outside of what BRJA does. So if you want to learn more about BRJA and our events, please check out our website or like our Facebook page. And if you want to hear more about these types of events, please sign up on to receive our mailing list so you can get like an email every time we have something, whether it be a class like Anthony had mentioned or one of these events. Normally, like I said, these are usually on the 13th, but due to Juneteenth being tomorrow, we originally were going to have it tomorrow, but we figured we'll have it on the 18th, and then we can post the link tomorrow. So if you know anyone who's interested in learning and won't be able to join us today, the link will be on our Facebook page and on our website so people can watch it and get the information. So without further ado, I have the opportunity to actually introduce folks this evening. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Shanga, and he is going to be doing a libation ceremony for us. So he's going to give us a little bit of history and understanding about what that is, and then do want to kind of start us off. So Shanga, you have the floor.
Peace, everyone. Peace, everyone. Peace. My name is Chango Onyango. I am a community guy. I wear a bunch of hats. Basically, conflict resolution is kind of my bailiwick, and organizational development. And my background as far as self-care all starts in the African diaspora and the African way of looking at things and indigenous ways of looking at things. And so it's very important, as you know, if you've ever been to church or if you've ever been to a really good, well-facilitated workshop, you know that it's very important how we start things off. And so libation is something that some cultures, you know, you get up and you do it every morning. Some cultures you do it in the afternoon. Some cultures you do it at different times during the day. But we here in Baltimore, my family, my community, we tend to use libation at the very least to start off every single gathering with intentionality and good energy. And we use a couple things. We use water, which I have here in a clear pitcher. It's better for a clear vessel. We use the earth, which I don't have plants in here in my office right now because I killed them because I have a brown thumb. But if you don't have the earth or semblance, you can use a white vessel. So you can be pouring from a clear vessel, clean water that has rested, not straight out of the Russian banging around in old rusty pipes, right? But a clean vessel into a white vessel, it at the very minimum. Really what you want to be doing is mimicking the hydrological cycle on the planet, which the water comes up or from its source, and it is used with intentionality, and then it goes back into the ground. So once you have your water, once you have your calm moment, the water is rested, you are rested, and you set your intention here, then you begin the process. And the process goes really simply like this. We start at the highest level. And so we say to the source of the universe, whether you believe in the Big Bang or you believe in Allah, God, or the purple people eater, whatever it is, we address the source and we give credit and thanks to the source that has us still in motion at this point. And then we pour water with that intention. And once we've done that, we use this affirmation word that says, and we use ashe. Some people use amen. It all means the same thing. I agree, let it be, so be it. Forward motion is what it symbolizes. So then we move to the many forces that move on the planet. If you're Catholic, you might say the saints. If you're into voodoo, you might say Shango, or whoever it is, if you're a scientist, you might say electricity, right? Because these are the forces with which that creator shapes and pushes the world forward. So to all those forces, we give thanks. And the point of giving thanks at every level is, imagine if tomorrow you only woke up with the things that you said thank you for today. So we say thanks for everything. So all of the powers that God uses to move the earth. And next, we give thanks for our lineage as a human, our species. We give thanks to all of those from whose genetic material was loaned to us so that we can enter this life. And we give thanks to them. And then we begin to give thanks to our own particular bloodline. And we like to call their names out. So even if you're on mute, just bring one of your ancestors to your mind and say their name. Say their name. Marion Jones, Ashe. Pick another name. Say another name. Marion James, Ashe. And we continue. Really, you should be able to rattle off a dozen or so before you have to start reaching. Bringing the energy of those people back to your mind, back to your life, is very important to kind of guide you. It's like updating your software every time you do it. Make sure the bugs are out. Nothing can do that like a memory of grandma, right? All right. Speaking of that, everybody is not an ancestor just because they pass on, all right? The ancestors are ones whose energy, whose character, who the stories about them are guiding you in the right direction, all right? That doesn't mean that others can't elevate over time to become ancestors, but that's a different conversation. So we picked out our ancestors and we gave them acknowledgement. Then we moved to our national heroes and sheroes. And this is the people who you know directly contributed to your current circumstance in a positive way. So we reach out for their energy by saying their names. So Sekou Touré, pick another name. Nat Turner, pick another name. Harriet Tubman. And again, you should be able to rattle off a dozen, the ones of those stories that really resonated with you. And then it gets local and it gets personal. So we give thanks for all of those whose name we don't know, who we know that they have perished, and we say, Ashe. We give thanks for all of those who are awaiting justice, and that's in a myriad of different ways, who are awaiting justice, because that is a form of limbo or purgatory, to still be waiting for justice. So we say Ashe to them. And then finally, we give energy into the future, the energy into our hope, which is to those souls and spirits who have yet to come, who have not yet come, the unborn. To them, we give thanks for the work that they will do. And we end our libation by saying together, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe-o. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Shanga, for leading us in that and actually introducing, because I've never heard, well, I've heard of all libation ceremonies, but never actually experienced one. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. So thank you for starting us off. But next up, we are going to have Ebony, who is going to give us a bit of history about Juneteenth. And we're going to have a little conversation as well. So Ebony, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ebony. I have a lot of jobs, but in this space right now, I am functioning as a trainer with BRJA. And I want to first shout out Juneteenth.com. It's a real website, and they have a lot of really great information, too much for me to be able to say in this short amount of time, but I really encourage you to go. They have a newsletter, and just like a lot of resources if you want to delve a little deeper and have a greater understanding of Juneteenth and past and the future. So our nation celebrates Independence Day, and they consider Independence Day July 4th, 1776. But at that time, Black people in the States were still seen as property. So our national celebration of Independence Day is false, because there were people still here that were not free and that were not seen as people. Most people also think that the Emancipation Proclamation freed slaves, and that is also not true. That is a whitewashing of history. The Emancipation Proclamation was issued on January 1st, 1863, and it has a lot of language that a lot of people pick out that insinuate that it freed slaves, so that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are henceforward shall be free. And so that's like a line that you might see a lot of people highlight, like, yeah, it set people free, but that's false. It actually was contingent upon the Union winning. And so the reason why the Emancipation Proclamation was really signed is so that they could enlist Black people into fighting for the Union. So it was about winning the war, and not necessarily like slavery was here we go. We can have an additional benefit of you all supporting us if you sign up, if you enlist to fight this war. If the Union wins, then Black people can be free. And so we can spend hours talking about the whitewashing of history and why that specific story that is untrue is perpetuated, but just a little history on that. And so when we think about the Union winning, in the southern states like Texas, there was very little Union presence. And so the Emancipation Proclamation had no impact on them if there was nobody there to enforce it. And there are a lot of different rumors about why it took a long time, and we can discuss them a little bit later, but some of the rumors have to do with maybe a messenger being murdered on the way to Texas. Another one was about the news, like the Texas actually knew, but they were withholding it because they wanted to maintain their current labor force and maintain the income that they were getting without having to pay wages to the Black people that were working on their plantations. And then there's a bigger, more insidious kind of rumor that federal troops were actually cool with slave owners, slavers holding on to Black people as enslaved, have one last cotton harvest. And if you're familiar with the cotton harvest, it was very prominent in Texas. And so some of these things feel like they're a little bit rooted in truth, but obviously the erasure of history means that we only have these kind of rumors to base off of. So we fast forward to June 19th, 1865. That's 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, which did not free slaves, did not free enslaved Black people. And we have Major General Gordon Granger arriving in Galveston, Texas to share the news of freedom. And he read General Order Number 3, and I will share just a little portion of it. Can y'all see it? Yes, all right. We're still in business. Okay, and so I'll read this for you. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves the absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. And so that is kind of the root of racism right there. Like, I mean, it is one of the first policies that we see that sets the tone for the inequities that we see now. So one, people were freed, but they were asked to maintain the relationship between the people that enslaved them and who had an ownership over them like a day ago. And so what is that? How do you go about not negotiate? Like, we have an issue now negotiating salary, but how do you negotiate salary with somebody who owned you, like who thinks that they own you and thinks that they had a right to own you? So it creates a really difficult thing. And then we see here written that freed people were not allowed to go and talk, like interact with the military and ask for assistance in that way. They had to work it out with their former masters, how exactly it's going to look to get money. And if they were idle, we see this beginning, like the incrimination of idleness existing in this General Order Number 3. It is basically saying that it's not okay for you to just be around doing nothing. You have to be working, but you can't just come and tell us you don't have anything to do. And so when we see the no loitering of present day and like policing of people just hanging out, it starts this like 1865. So just thinking about how laws were created and have always been created to incriminate Black existing fully free and liberated. But not to get on a tangent, because I will. So he read this order, this General Order Number 3, and then poof, freedom started. And so as we can imagine, it probably didn't go as smoothly as like, I'm reading this and now everybody's free, because there's no established how you should pay people, what are the conditions they can work under. It's just like, you don't own them anymore. And so we see now where even those words later, that didn't mean that people could technically, Black people could own property. It didn't mean that they could vote. It didn't mean that they had any rights other than that they weren't technically owned by anyone. And so that left a lot of room for former masters and former enslavers to just kind of decide how they wanted freedom to look for Black people. But back to Juneteenth. Juneteenth is a celebration of liberation, and it is sometimes referred to as Jubilee Day. It's sometimes referred to as Freedom Day. Sometimes it's celebrated on the third Sunday, so that it's like a weekend event, because the 19th of June can fall on any day of the week. And it essentially symbolizes Black American freedom, achievement, liberation. And so also the word Juneteenth is a combination of June and 19 together to create Juneteenth, but you might hear people call it all those other things that I named. And so I would like to open up and ask folks how, I guess I had a question at first, but now I'm feeling this different vibe. What do you all feel about the information that you just received, the whitewashing of history, the very loose language around the rights that were given to newly freed Black people? Like, what are your reactions to it? How are you feeling about that? What does this mean to you? And we can unmute people who raise their hand. I can't, but maybe Anthony can.
Is it okay if I say something?
You can unmute yourself. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I think that a big part of Black liberation is the fact that, like, knowing your history and like knowing kind of what freedom looks like and the process that our ancestors took to get us to freedom. And I think that our public schools do a really big disservice in the fact that I never learned about Juneteenth growing up. And if I was gonna learn about Juneteenth, it was from my parents directly and not from the public school system. And so I think that that's like it's just a very interesting thing to be like, oh, there's a big part of my history that is not taught when we learn about American history.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Juneteenth website, I cannot shout it out enough. It talks about how in the early 1900s, due to like economic issues and things like that, we see, and then the slow change from homeschooling to having Black children go to school at institutions, we see the decline in Juneteenth celebration and acknowledgement, and then the whitewashing of the whole situation between the Emancipation Proclamation and what actually went down. Other folks' reactions? And I have a follow-up question. Well, if you don't have a reaction, then you want to share.
You might want to also go to the chat if you want to.
Do you want to read what's in the chat, Julia?
Yeah. So Kristen said, thank you for that great summary with key details. I also never learned about Juneteenth in school, though did later, but still did not know some of those details. Karen said, I am learning more and more every day about how many signs and signals of racism are very openly present today. I will never look at no loitering sign the same again. And Laura said, I'm 41 years old, and I only recently learned about Juneteenth a few years ago, and until today, did not know the details. Wow.
Thank you for sharing. And folks, feel free to unmute yourself to respond because I can't see everybody.
Ebony, I'd like to ask you a question, your thoughts. Given the limitations of the General Order Number 3, how do you explain the grassroots celebrations?
Well, I don't know how to answer that question. I don't really understand. Are you asking me how folks were able to celebrate Juneteenth given they weren't allowed to be out and about? Just idleness? Are you speaking to the language of idleness?
No, my understanding is that the celebrations were jubilant. And yet the Juneteenth order, as you've noted, is quite muted, really is curbs the liberation.
Okay, so essentially people are celebrating not the whole document, they're celebrating the fact that freedom, so it's not, I don't want us to get too lost in the weeds of my criticism of the actual general order, but the celebration comes from no longer being enslaved. That's why folks were happy.
Can I piggyback off that, Ebony, just to add to what you said? I think that what Ebony was trying to convey is that we're looking at this through eyes of people now living in 2020, right? Like, for people who were enslaved and thought they were going to be enslaved and their children were going to be enslaved, this was still a huge thing for them to celebrate. I've read stories
of make money, the option that you could,
right, or just not to be in bondage anymore. And so there are stories of people who literally kind of that first night that they were freed, they kind of stayed up all night together celebrating because they just couldn't even believe that this was happening for them, right? So while this document is very problematic, I don't want us to lose sight in that this was an extremely joyful time for our ancestors to get this news.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then my follow-up question is, Julia, you have something to say? No, okay, sorry. My follow-up question to you all is, why do you think Juneteenth isn't celebrated or talked about in schools, and why Are there still, why is it not a federal holiday? What are some of your thoughts around why specifically this one is not highlighted?
Can I take a stab at it?
Sure.
It's because we're anti-Black, we're racist as shit. We are just people who don't recognize our history and our oppression of people, and then we like thrive off of it, and we never look back. It's like, oh, I did it by myself. And we don't even take a moment to consider what making it by yourself looks like, because it's never that. It's never that. It's never.
And in the chat, we have white society doesn't want. Pardon? So in the chat, white society doesn't want Black liberation. And so that is something also a really key point, is that by perpetuating the false narrative that the Emancipation Proclamation freed enslaved folks, it makes it seem like freedom was given when really it was not. It was earned, like people fought for it, and then it also had to be enforced and forced on different parts of the country.
Yeah.
Can I comment? Someone put something in the chat about 40 acres and a mule and asking about that being rescinded. And, you know, part of my understanding of that is that that was like a wartime promise to provide up to 40 acres. Up to 40 acres, right? And so the way that we talk about it now is a promise of 40 whole acres to every person plus a mule. The mules actually weren't guaranteed. It was like if there were leftover mules from the Confederacy, like then you can have this mule, but that actually wasn't part of what was promised, and it was a wartime promise. And so once the war was over, there wasn't as much interest in it, and so it went away. But it wasn't a guarantee either.
Yeah. How much time do we have? I can just wrap up with one more thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so I did want to comment on white Americans are uneducated and or ashamed of the legacy of our past. If they know about it, they are afraid to look at it and acknowledge it. And so I hear that. But I would also like to say it's a little bit more intentional than that. And so there are reasons why we only celebrate liberators or freedom fighters who are dead. I think that there are a lot of people who are still alive, who have worked really hard and who did a lot of amazing work towards freedom, but there's a narrative of perpetuating like doing extreme things gets you killed. And that's not true. We can do liberation work and keep our lives, but highlighting those who died in the struggle perpetuates this fear, like I need to make a choice of life or death right now. And so I think sometimes we have to take off the rose-colored glasses and just look at things how they are. It's not, I mean, there is shame to it, rooted into it, and not being educated, but it intentionally is not included. And when you think about how you've learned about the Emancipation Proclamation, you were intentionally misled. And so I want you to not think about them as accidental. They're not. They perpetuate a very similar, it's a narrative that we are seeing even in 2020 of like, oh, I didn't know I was racist this whole time. Wow, I'm so surprised. It's like, you didn't know you were racist. You just said you just were overlooking it. So like, just let's be honest when we're being honest and say, it was intentional. It was done on purpose. We were misled. And these are the ways that it perpetuates white supremacy, because it makes it seem like white people hand out freedom, that white people are coming to save Black people. And none of that is actually true. There were a great deal of sacrifices and a lot of promises made to people in order to get them to buy into the idea of like fighting for a war that really didn't have much benefit for them. And then we see where the outcomes of it were crap. It was just, it was not that beneficial to the folks other than just freedom. It had nothing attached to it. There were no teeth attached to the promise.
Hey, Ebony, I have a question.
Oh.
Forgive me for, I hope I didn't cut you off.
I was just rambling, so you can go.
No, you were speaking truth, and I'm really grateful for it. My name is Pam Nwako, resident of DC. So I know that at least from the proclamation you shared with us, this was specific to Texas. So we know that enslaved persons in Texas didn't know, that they were free. Do we know the extent to which this lack of knowledge was spread across different states?
Now, we do not have proof of how many people had to get personally invited to freedom, but if we can think about how the Union and the Confederacy was set up, if in Texas there wasn't a large there wasn't a large presence, it is not reckless to assume that in all the other Confederate areas, folks were still being enslaved or treated as property. And even I would go so far as to say in 2020 in the South and in other, like our prison labor system is one that is very similar to slavery. And so freedom came. And I do think that it was not I think it was staggered. I think maybe this Juneteenth one was one of the last ones, but there isn't much conversation about how many times they had to go back, how many, all that history is kind of lost, it gets swept under the rug. And so I don't have an answer, but I know in my heart that it didn't happen overnight.
Thank you for that. I agree with you.
So I think we can move on. I'm good.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much, Ebony, for that lovely history, and as well as having those thought-provoking questions. And next up, we are actually going to have Courtney from the Juneteenth Collective. She's going to share some information about what that is exactly, and basically how people are actually celebrating Juneteenth in 2020 and beyond. So, Courtney, you have the floor.
Thanks, folks. Thanks, Ebony, for sharing your screen so you folks can see our logo, our image. And so, this conversation of Black liberation, that's a 400 plus year conversation. Like, we're still trying to figure out what that means. There's a lot of debate around it. And even after emancipation, lots of debates on how do we achieve Black liberation. And so there were thoughts about achieving wealth, right? Getting vocational skills, buying property. Booker T. Washington talked a lot about that. W.E. Du Bois talked about really trying to make sure that we fight for equity, that we fight for inclusion, because that, in addition to the wealth and the attainment of skills, was going to lead to Black liberation, right? And we're still wrestling with all of that. And so that is somewhat where Juneteenth Collective comes in. It's a group of some friends, some acquaintances, some folks who didn't meet each other until the group was formed, who wanted to make a call to action and try to put information in a way that folks could digest it and figure out, how can I contribute to Black liberation? And so it's a call to action, but it's also resources. And so let me just say, we're 6 days into this thing. Ebony's involved in it, and we just launched on Saturday. So we had a lot of conversation. We were gathering information. So we're new into this, and we don't want to make it seem like we're the end all be all of this information. But when I talk to people about Black liberation and buyouts, blackouts, making sure that you're only investing or giving to Black owned organizations, folks said, I don't know how to do that. What does that look like? I don't have a list. I don't know where to start. I've been doing a lot of Uber Eats. Does that mean I can't eat now? What am I supposed to do? And so we had conversation around that and trying to make it easy for folks, at least in the Baltimore area for now, to figure out what's out there. And so this is 2 parts. So Juneteenth is a call to action. So every 19th of the month, we're asking folks to participate in acts of resistance that lead to Black liberation. And then also, as Ebony's displaying right now, we're providing folks with resources, right? So we're talking about Black-led mental health organizations and spotlighting them. You'll see information on Band-Aids that match various flesh tones, so that people can feel included and represented in the products that they purchase. And so we're working diligently to provide all these resources and collect them. And so part of this is asking folks to like our page, follow us on Facebook. I guess you follow on Twitter. I don't really know social medias. So you like the page on Facebook, you follow on Instagram. That's it. And then you help us build our resources and really take this call to action seriously. Think about what you can do every 19th of the month and figure out what that looks like for you. Like, how does that match your activism style? Do you want to be involved in a protest? Are you only going to purchase Black? Are you going to lead like a artivism event? Are you going to do some writing? Like, what does Black liberation look like to you? Are you going to mentor some children? Are you just going to hug and love on your family members and the people that you've chosen to be your family? So really thinking about that. And then also we want to document the impact. And that's a huge part of it too. So it's not just doing it, but it's following up and letting us know, what did you do? If you diverted all of your spending to Black organizations, tell us how much, so we can begin to measure how much money is being diverted and funneled back into Black-led, Black-owned organizations. So, again, it's a call to action. It's a challenge. This week, Juneteenth starts tomorrow, but I'm challenging myself and my family to go the whole weekend, actually starting this evening. We're starting this and we're going the entire weekend. And so if you can think about, what does it look like for a weekend? And then next month, what does it look like for 5 days? And then the next month, what does it look like for a week and a half? And start to build it until it becomes commonplace for you to really work towards Black liberation, supporting Black-owned organizations and companies. So thank you for having me here today. I hope that you'll follow us. Our Instagram looks amazing. I didn't have anything to do with that, but it looks great. Thanks, Ebony.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I think
also
that
like to encourage folks really quick, piggyback off of Courtney. The idea of overhauling your whole life to Black-owned it can be daunting for some. And so I would we will be posting, but I also want you to think about what are some Black-owned swap outs that you can do. And so I ran out of Band-Aids and I was like, perfect time to stock up on my Black Band-Aids. So that you can think about it that way. And also, yeah, so that's it. I just want not to think like, oh my gosh, I have this all right now. You can do it little by little. And then you can also just be creative and be open-minded about how you can slowly get into, or abruptly if you are that kind of person, but want to do it slow, you could do it one thing at a time.
Hey, Ebony, it's Erica.
Hi, Erica.
And on that same vein, I want to offer that one of the first things I thought about doing and was so happy to find is Quelly TV. It is a Black-owned streaming service that also has tons of content for kids on it, highlighting like from Canada to Uganda to Brazil. It's and American stuff. It's all on there, and with representation being so important, and the images that we get on American TV or just regular American TV or the streaming services that we have, I think that Quelly TV, owned by a sister, is a great thing, a potential first step for those people who like to indulge in some binge watching. And it's at a very reasonable price. It is only $49 for a year of streaming service. So I highly recommend that. And what I will do is I'll go grab the URL and put it in the chat for people who are interested.
Yes, please.
Please do.
Thank you. Also for Uber, there's Okra. Oh, I'm sorry, Courtney.
No, go.
There's you buy your food through Chow Now, but the app Okra Eat or Eat Okra, it is a Black-owned restaurant hub. And so it'll, wherever you are, if you're in Maryland, DC, New York, wherever, it will find the Black-owned restaurants in your area and you can order from them. So just something to think about. I'll write it in the chat.
Yeah,
I also,
I also go ahead, Michelle.
real quick, I just wanted to, again, piggyback off what Ebony was saying, that people might feel overwhelmed. There is a Facebook page called Good Tree. Lots of people are on there. I highly recommend for Baltimore, DC, DMV area, if you're ever looking for a Black-owned business, I got a face painter through them. I got someone to come cut my shrubs. Like any kind of service you can think of, or you want to get recommendations, it's an excellent source. Anything that pops in your head, let me get a Black-owned business to do this thing for me. Please join Good Tree on Facebook, and anytime you have a question about something or looking for something, people will jump in and recommend. So that way people don't feel so overwhelmed about looking for these things, because there isn't like one place to go to find all the Black-owned things, right? But I would say that that's a great resource for the area.
Yeah, Michelle, I think someone asked if you could post that in the chat.
Yeah.
But also, I just want to ask folks to be patient with some of these small Black-owned businesses. Many of them are getting huge increases in customers right now, right? And that adjustment takes some time. And so I know there are some crab shacks that, you know, people were waiting an hour, hour and a half, but also people weren't going to them a month ago. Not in the volumes that they're going to now. And so I think that we just have to be willing to give these companies grace as they find their footing and they, you know, and are becoming more accustomed to all of the business that they're receiving. And also like really take into account that a lot of times if a white-owned organization messes up, we don't say we're cutting off all white-owned organizations, but I hear chatter all the time about if a Black-owned organization or company makes a mistake, then people are through with them. So if you find yourself thinking that, I want you to like reflect on it, check yourself, figure out why you're thinking those things, and then keep working with that company. Stick with them.
Absolutely. Thank you all, Courtney, Michelle, Ebony, for all of that information. I really appreciate it. I learned something new. And I also want to open it up now to Michelle, so when we first started this kind of conversation about this event, we wanted to celebrate, to give some history about Juneteenth. But even more, I am really interested in hearing about how people actually do celebrate Juneteenth now, especially because it seems to have grown in popularity over the last few years. And more importantly, Michelle here actually inspired me like last year because she kind of threw some events. So I want her to kind of talk about what she did, and maybe some of our other panelists to kind of share what they're doing tomorrow or this week to celebrate or to give back, or what their plans are. So Michelle, you can take it away.
Thank you, Julia. My name is Michelle Dewberry. I am a BRJA facilitator, and I also co-host the 13th of the month events with the lovely Julia. I feel like last year for me was the first year I really felt compelled to actively celebrate Juneteenth. I'd always kind of heard about it. I didn't know anyone who celebrated it. For whatever reason last year, I really felt compelled to actually have an event for Juneteenth. So last year what I did was I was actually approached by a friend to do a kind of like a pop-up for Black-owned businesses, but that kind of fell through. And then when that fell through, I was like, I still want to do something for Juneteenth this year. So what I ended up doing was just having a cookout. You know, it was like, I just want to get as much Black people together outside and just enjoy each other. And for me, I feel like the way that I feel like honoring my ancestors when it comes to Juneteenth is like, for me, it's about community, and it's about us having as much joy as possible. So I was just like, I organized, I got donations from people brought food, people brought their families. I think probably close to 100 people came out. The weather was perfect that day. All the kids got together. A few of the teenagers took all of the kids that came, and we were in Patapsco State Park. They all went on a hike together. It was like literally we were one big happy family. And I'm so glad I did that because the day just felt so blessed, honestly. So I just want to say that in celebrating Juneteenth, I don't want people to get overwhelmed, like, am I celebrating this the right way? I don't think there's a quote unquote right way to celebrate it. I think as long as you are having joy and you're uplifting Black people, then I think however you choose to celebrate it is okay, and do what you feel led to do. I also have a virtual event this year just to encourage people to buy Black. Like Courtney was saying, I want people to buy Black as much as possible tomorrow. But that's just, it doesn't have to be big and over the top. It can be a very simple thing as long as you're spreading joy and uplifting Black people on that day.
Absolutely. So thank you, Michelle. So I'm going to ask if Courtney and Ebony are doing anything tomorrow. Is Anthony doing anything tomorrow? Just to kind of like get other people what they're doing?
Yes. Tomorrow I will start my day celebrating Juneteenth with my cousin, who is a Black yoga instructor who has a Black-owned yoga studio called BYC 26. It was located in Columbia. She did have to close down her physical location because of COVID, and so she is doing a social distancing demonstration of yoga down on Lafayette Plaza on Black Lives Matter Plaza in DC, and so that's how I'll start my day. And then I will be working half the day doing an education session with University of Maryland, Baltimore on Juneteenth, like this holiday, a longer version of what I talked about here, and then I will end the day with more Black yoga.
That sounds lovely. Courtney, anything from you?
Yeah, I'm going to work half the day as well, but I'm going to spend the rest of the day just with my Black husband and my Black son and just enjoying time with them. That's it.
Oh, okay. Well, I am, weather permitting tomorrow, I'm supposed to be hanging out with some of my friends. Just like, yes, and Ebony was supposed to come to that, but she just forgot. So
I'm also going to that. That's a part of my Black day. Like, I'm going to be hanging.
Yeah. It's fine. It's fine, Ebony. But no, like, so if weather permitting, hanging out with some friends, social distancing, obviously, just to kind of like be around other people and to just celebrate and have some fun. I am certainly interested in hearing of any of the people who came to our event today, how they plan on celebrating. They can share in the chat, and we can share off some of them if they want to put it in the chat for us today.
Julia, it looks like Monica Joseph is raising her hand.
Okay, Monica Joseph, you're free to talk.
Sure, thank you guys. I'm camera shy, but I'm very excited to be joining up with two of my dearest Black friends from high school. We're gonna meet in DC, and if anyone knows what Mochella is, I wanna share the story because I find it interesting. So I used to go to Howard University, and for anyone who knows Howard in the Georgia Avenue area, there's a Metro PCS shop that will always play go-go music, which is, part of Black culture and Black history in DC. And a lot of the new gentrifiers that were coming in that were white were complaining about the loudness of the music. So they started this festival to play go-go music as loud as they want and celebrate Black culture. And there's going to be a little Mochella tomorrow. So I think that's a great way to celebrate. I'm excited.
Awesome stuff. Thank you for sharing, Monica. Even though you went to Howard, I mean, I went to the best HBCU. I went to Morgan, but that's for another time.
Morgan.
Another debate. Okay. Another event.
Hey, my brother went to Morgan.
So there are some people in the chat. Anyway, there are some things in the chat that people are sharing. Someone said they're going to go hiking and reading Well Read Black Girl. That sounds like fun. Someone said they've been struggling to how to spend the day uplifting the Black community and spending money at Black-owned local business feels right. Laura shared that the Harriet Tubman Museum is doing a virtual opening tomorrow at 3. So if you want to look into that, that might be good. Harriet has shared that we are discussing Juneteenth at work tomorrow, including how to celebrate Black liberation as an organization in years to come. That sounds really good, especially if if you are working, finding ways to get your job incorporated. That sounds really cool. And that seems about it for right now. Oh, wait a minute, no. Yep, that seems to be about it right now. So, so someone said, as a white ally, I'm attending an ACLU police accountability workshop. All right, well, that's a good way to do it. So,
can I offer one?
Yes, please.
So, hey, this is Erica. So I plan on spending the morning chasing after my 4-year-old in somebody's piece of grass because I just need to see her laughing through some grass and absorb some of that Black girl joy, especially on a day like Juneteenth. But also, and I'm happy that this has happened because it's really, for me, a connection to community. And my grandmother is that she was a Black woman in Baltimore, and she was part of, before she passed, she was a part of a book club called the Reviewers, and they've been meeting for over 46 years. And I have introduced these women to Zoom platforms. So these octogenarians will be getting together tomorrow to have a book club meeting, as they have done for the past half a century. So that's how I'm spending my Juneteenth.
Awesome.
I love
that sounds
Erica.
fun.
Erica,
So do
I love it all. And so I'm a Latina lesbian, and what I'm gonna do tomorrow is snatch up my Latino white folks who are just being asinine. So I'm gonna work on that. I'm not sure how great it's gonna work, but I'm gonna start calling out people for their asinine ways, and I'm gonna have to do something. So that's my that's my promise for tomorrow, and actually not tomorrow, just every day. I'm just gonna start snatching them up and educating them about colorism and the fact that we need to build bridges and be in it together, because white supremacy is killing us all in very different ways, but it's unacceptable.
Absolutely.
That's a BACO member, y'all.
Yeah, I hear her. But yeah, so absolutely. Thank you all for sharing how you plan on having fun tomorrow on Juneteenth, whether that be celebrating with friends, doing yoga, watching your children, reading books, or also just fighting a good fight, hopefully educating people and bring more awareness, or doing your own research. If you would love to, of course, like I said, follow Courtney's Juneteenth Collective to get more information about ways to do this every month. It shouldn't just be in June. Obviously, that can be the big event, but we should always find every month to celebrate ourselves, our culture, our community, but even more, find ways to fight for freedom and be liberated. So I thank everyone for coming. I'm going to actually, since I told you earlier that every single month we have an event, we're going to have one coming up. We're planning for one next month in July. I'm going to have Michelle kind of share a little bit about that, and then we're going to wrap it up for the day. Michelle?
Thank you, Julia. So next month, it's an event that I had kind of wanted to be doing, and given the current, political climate, next month we will be discussing prison and police abolition, and we will be having some abolitionists on the panel. I think that when we talk about Juneteenth and, the document that Ebony shared with us, and how, even though at the beginnings of Black people, quote unquote, being freed, there were all these stipulations around their freedom, right? It wasn't really freedom. And so we've still been struggling with that. We've been struggling with the fact that, so many Black people are now being incarcerated, and how that's still a form of slavery. So yes, we'll be talking about and imagining a world in which Black people are not, held down by these systems that are birthed from racism and white supremacy, and how it affects Black and brown communities, and how it keeps us from really truly being free. So that's what we will be discussing on July. We're going to have some abolitionists on the panel. We're still working out the details of who those panelists will be. I want it to also be a space for us to dream and imagine what our world could look like if, policing were a completely different thing. If, huge parts of our populations weren't in prison for nonviolent offenses. So that's what we'll be talking about in July. Be looking out for the flyer with the panelists on the flyer.
All right, thank you so much. I want to thank all of my panelists today who shared, gave history, shared some of their own experiences celebrating Juneteenth. And if you want to learn more about, like I said, our organization, I think that we're at bemoreantiracist.org. And Anthony just put up the link to donate if you're interested in doing that. If you want to share this link of our event, we're going to be putting that up on our Facebook tomorrow. And so please check us out. Thank you all for attending, and have a beautiful Thursday evening and a happy Juneteenth to you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eve.